All right, buckle up, data junkies and trendsetters. We are truly seeing tectonic shifts reshaping our data and AI landscape. On this episode of It Depends, we are not only exploring the latest M&A, but also what is driving these massive changes that we are starting to see and what trends do they leave in their wake. We will look at some not so obvious agendas behind these M&As and dare ask an uncomfortable question: do these M&As make sense? Perhaps it's the economic uncertainties, maybe it's due to tariffs or the political instability in the world, or maybe it's merely the fact that there is an oversized focus on AI at the expense of data foundations that are creating these challenges and dichotomies. Whatever it is, we will look at what's going on in the space of data and AI. You will notice there are a few themes that will bubble up in our discussion. The first major theme is that big players are calling the shots. These are hyperscalers, so AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, but they're also Snowflake, Databricks, even Salesforce, ServiceNow, and then the old-time standouts like Oracle, SAP, and so on. Consolidation is a mega trend. Smaller companies, when I talk to them these days, I notice a lot of them are stuck in this 10 to $30 million ARR and they're just not growing. I even talked to a lot of mid-sized companies that are in 100 to $300 million range. Also, same story. They are not growing adequately. It used to be that these small players is where the innovation used to happen. The big players were slow to not only innovate, but also they had to deal with something called innovators dilemma. So the word that I use or hear a lot these days is distribution. These large players have an influence that is shaping the future, and small players just have to come along and navigate whatever is being directed by these large companies. Sometimes I even joke that one of the most important roles within an organization these days is the VP of alliances, because ecosystem is everything. It creates gravity, it pulls in talent, investment, and market share. These large companies, you will see why these acquisitions are taking place is because they're creating these integrated solutions that specialized vendors are having a lot of trouble competing with. So let's take a look at what's going on in this space. What I've done is I have divided my talk today into a number of different sections. So here are the categories that we will be talking about. Let's start with databases. The first one I want to talk about is a news that hit literally a few days ago. This is Databricks announcing that they are buying Neon, is what triggered me to record this episode of It Depends. A lot of people reached out to me. So I was surprised how many people reached out. I said, what is Neon? I've never even heard of Neon. So it turns out Neon is actually the founder of Neon is the person who had created MemSQL, one of the founders, Nikita. And so he's been in the database space for a long time. So he recognized that there's a market at the lower end, and that would be best served by a serverless Postgres database. So keeping up with the modern times of separation of compute and store, he created this innovative Postgres database that uses an object store like S3 as a common storage. And then each instance of Postgres runs as a compute node on its own. So it is still single node. It's not a distributed database, but it's a distributed architecture, if you may. So, and Postgres, for those who've been listening or following some of the things I've been publishing, Postgres has won the race. It is the major open source database. Actually, there are only two standards, MySQL, which is owned by Oracle, and Postgres. And Postgres has been innovating at a pretty rapid clip for some time. Just a little bit of background. Postgres came out of UC Berkeley. Michael Stonebreaker was at that time working at UC Berkeley. There was a database called Ingress. Postgres was supposed to be the follow-up to Ingress, and he called it Postgres. So Postgres is a OLTP, or a transaction database. And in the world of databases, you got OLTP and you got analytical. In Gartner, many years ago, we used to have two separate Magic Quadrants, one for OLTP and one for analytical, or some people call it OLAP. But then Gartner recognized that a lot of vendors were converging onto a single database, and they created a term which they no longer use called HTAP, which stands for Hybrid Transactional Analytical Processing. Forrester calls it translytical, but the name is not important. The idea is that you've got a database that can bring transaction data, which is typically in a row store, converted, have a copy in column store, because then you can do very fast queries and not overwhelm each other capabilities. So HTAP has had some success, but not everybody's bought onto it. AWS has almost 15 or so purpose-built databases. So they've got Aurora for OLTP, they've got Redshift, they've got RDS also for OLTP, they've got DynamoDB, Elastic. A lot of these databases now talk to each other. They replicate data through ETL, but what AWS introduced, Zero ETL, which is caught on by a lot of vendors, it hides the complexity of replicating data across OLTP and OLAP databases. Now, what Snowflake tried to do was they said, we built this hugely popular cloud data warehouse, and we are going to extend our data model, which is proprietary, into transactional. They created Unistore a couple of years ago, and then last year they were calling it hybrid tables. So has not been a very successful journey for them, but we will learn more. In the first week of June is Snowflake Summit, where we will learn about what's new in Snowflake. And then the week after that is Databricks Data and AI Summit. So let's talk about Databricks. So Databricks buys an OLTP database called Neon, and now they have a full-fledged standalone database. So that is already deployed. One interesting thing that stood out from the press release is that 80% of Neon databases are created by AI agents. So that gives us an idea of what could be the future role of Neon as we move into this agentic architecture. Being serverless and being highly optimized, what Neon is really good at is that you can bring up an instance of Neon under 1 second. So agents need to get data from databases. They need to call other tools. The protocol for agent to tool is what Anthropic created called Model Context Protocol, MCP. MCP is stateless. So Neon can be the database at the agent level where the state can be maintained. So that is one big advantage. The other advantage is, of course, now Databricks is a player in this HTAP space, because now they got offerings on both sides of the equation. This acquisition was for $1 billion. And this is something that we've come to expect from Databricks every year around their conference. They do $1 billion acquisition. Last year was Tabular, which is created by people who created Apache Iceberg. We'll talk quite a bit about that later on today. And then the year before that, it was Mosaic ML. So the jury is still out. It's too early. They've just bought it. It's quite exciting that Databricks has expanded its footprint. And now we'll see how this pans out. By the way, Neon's not the only one. There were some other databases. In fact, they are more expensive. There's one called Suprabase. And since we're talking about these open source databases, there is another database that some of you may not have ever heard of called SQLite. SQLite has almost 1 trillion deployments. Every Android phone, every iPhone, every browser that you have, every medical edge devices, they all have SQLite, but it's a database that you never even hear about. Okay, let's move on. We have a lot of space to cover. So IBM bought DataStax. What is DataStax? In the early 2000s, when the NoSQL movement started, Facebook created something called Apache Cassandra. It's a column-oriented database, highly distributed, highly reliable, very high throughput. If you've ever bought an Apple iPhone or you've called a ride on Uber, it's being driven by Apache Cassandra, open source. So some of the people who were associated with Cassandra project, they went and created DataStax, a commercial version of DataStax. DataStax has continued to innovate. They have a database as a service called Astra. They also have some of the finest vector embedding support into DataStax. But DataStax made a huge mistake. They, in the excitement to cash onto the Cassandra name, they decided to distance themselves from the open source community, and that did not go very well in the market. So DataStax ended up in a bit of a stagnant space. IBM buying DataStax came as quite a big surprise to everyone. And everyone assumes that a lot of people think they bought it for Cassandra, and that is not the real reason why they bought it. Buying a Cassandra database is actually not that useful because Cassandra is already open source, but they bought it for its agentic, or actually for its AI capabilities. One thing that Cassandra has done, DataStax has done really well, it's created something called Langflow. Langflow is this no-code, low-code approach to create AI applications and pipelines, like RAG pipelines. And IBM's big focus this year is towards handling unstructured data, because they think that 99% of data in the world is untapped because it's unstructured and it's within an enterprise. So it's the most valuable data. So they want to get into this unstructured space. IBM's other goal is to also get closer to developers. So the fact that DataStax has Langflow and has native JSON support are the two primary reasons why IBM went for an acquisition of DataStax. So now you know. Since we're talking about developer community, let's talk about the granddaddy of databases when it comes to developer community, and that's MongoDB. So MongoDB is a document database, also NoSQL, and they pretty much ran away with this market share for document databases. But then they came to a conclusion when GenAI suddenly hit the market that while doing a semantic search and building RAG pipelines is all pretty transformative, but hallucination is holding everyone back. So Voyage AI, the company that they bought, has its own embedding and a re-ranking model. And the purpose they bought it was because now you can have your data in MongoDB. MongoDB also has one of the better vector embedding supports in the market, but with Voyage AI, they can reduce hallucinations, improve accuracy, and help developers build AI applications that the businesses can then adopt and trust. So that's why you see here. By the way, I've listed these companies in sort of a chronological order based on Databricks hitting the news first, and then IBM. And then the last piece I want to talk about is OpenAI. What's OpenAI doing in this list of databases? OpenAI bought a database company. This company is called Rockset, created by some of the people who were involved in yet another Facebook project called RocksDB. which is a very, very good key value store. And so these people left and they created an analytical database with multiple types of indexes, so very fast lookups, and they called it Rockset. So when OpenAI bought Rockset, we all thought, oh, wow. So now we are witnessing that a company that only builds models is getting into the database market because they also want to move up the chain instead of just being the AI infrastructure, which is mostly GPUs and models. They want to get into the database layer. But that's not what happened. They actually told Rockset customers that we are done with you guys, go find a replacement. Some went to single store, some went to Couchbase, some went to a bunch of other Materialize, and there were all these LinkedIn posts of all these databases telling Rockset customers, migrate to our platform. So OpenAI basically took the talent that had built Rockset and used their expertise to come up with real-time APIs. But they, as of this point, are not in the database space. There are databases that underpin ChatGPT, for instance, and the database that underpins ChatGPT is from Microsoft Azure, and it is Cosmos DB. So, but we're not talking about that here. Let's move on to the next category, which is called data catalogs. So this is a very interesting category. I've been covering this for many, many years. Metadata is literally the glue that brings everything together, all the workloads together on the same copy of data. It's that critical. So I have gone on record to saying that data catalogs are absolutely essential in any organization. However, they don't have an existential crisis. They have an identity crisis. Where should the data catalog exist? Should it be part of my BI tool, my data transformation tool? Should it be standalone? Should it be embedded in different products? Because every product, whether it's doing security policies or it's doing data preparation or master data management, data quality, they all need a catalog. So that's how important data catalogs are. But the problem is that this category is also oversaturated with a lot of companies, and many of them are not growing at this point. For example, data.world is a company that has a fine product based on knowledge graphs, does very high accuracy work, but it's one of many data catalogs. So ServiceNow announced a few days ago that they're buying data.world. Again, it came as a surprise. Why? Because ServiceNow is a ITSM company. It's not a company that we see in the data management space very often. But this leads us to theme number 2. So I talked about theme number 1, which is consolidation. Theme number 2 is any company that owns business data has an inherent advantage of offering an end-to-end platform. ServiceNow is super well entrenched in Fortune 500 companies. So it has a view into the data. So for them to get into the data catalog business makes great sense. And that's what they are doing. The next one is interesting, which is Coalesce. Coalesce is in automating your data transformations and making it easier to do your development. So again, because metadata is so fundamental to anything you do, so they have bought CastorDoc. CastorDoc is in the long collection of data catalog vendors. There's a long tail of vendors, and CastorDoc was one of the smaller ones in this space, but it gives Coalesce an ability to now bring the power of a data catalog with what they do. Now, how useful this combination will be, it's a great idea, and we will see how this progresses. Cloudera, talking about identity crisis, Cloudera was one of the first companies, it was the first company, or one of the first companies actually, Hortonworks and Cloudera, in the Hadoop space. There were actually so many MapR, and there were maybe a dozen other companies that were in the Hadoop space. The name of Cloudera has cloud in it. It's meant for cloud era, but because they came out so early and cloud was not that well established, that they found their footing on premises. So today, Cloudera does far more than Hadoop and HBase. It has an end-to-end platform, very mature because it's been doing it for many, many years. It's had a data catalog called Shared Data Experience, or SDX, for many, many years. But now it has also bought Octopai. Octopai is in the space of metadata lineage, which is one of the functions of data catalog, and a very important one, because what Cloudera is trying to do is help developers build this end-to-end data and AI application space. Now, Cloudera has a huge advantage, which people do not realize, because they think that Hadoop era came and went, was too complex, but they manage 26 exabytes of data under in their purview. So that is more than almost every vendor that I'm talking about in this episode. So that's how much data they have. But because of their roots in AI, and now to differentiate, so they've come up with this thing called private AI, and Octopi is giving them a visibility into lineage all the way from edge to on-premises to the cloud. So that is their acquisition, and actually it's been quite well received. Talking about companies wanting to become platforms, we come to Actian. Actian is a database management system. And again, to expand their portfolio and become more appealing to organizations, they bought another small data catalog company like CastorDoc, is also based in Europe. This one is called Zenea. And now this database company is becoming more of a platform. What you see here happening is that organizations, buyers are saying that stop selling us point solutions for every micro specialization of the stack. We would rather have entrenched provider provide us those functionalities. And that takes us to the very last one, which is Teradata buying Stemma. This thing happened 2 years ago. So in the chronological order, this happened a long time ago. But I included it here because I thought it shows that this consolidation had already started years ago. So what is Stemma? In the world of open source data catalogs, we don't have too many choices. The big one comes from LinkedIn. It's called Data Hub, and Actual Data is a company that's taking it, commercializing it. The other one came out of Lyft. It's called Amundsen, and Stemma was a company that was creating a commercial version of Amundsen, but instead they have now sold it to Teradata. So that's a story with data catalogs. Now, I just want to give a little bit of a view into what is happening in this data catalog space, because remember earlier on I said these large hyperscalers and large companies are all bringing in very deep metadata capabilities into them. For example, Google Cloud has something called Dataplex. Now it's being called Universal Catalog. The great thing about Universal Catalog is that because it is so well integrated and built in, as soon as new piece of data is ingested into Google Cloud, like BigQuery, it is instantly discoverable in Universal Catalog. Also, there's a huge move to handle structured and unstructured data. So that's why these catalogs are coming up. AWS also retooled their go-to-market for how they unify data and AI, and the glue is their catalog. Now they call it SageMaker Catalog. So AWS already had a catalog. Some of you may be saying, wait, didn't they have Glue? Yes, Glue is a catalog AWS has. It is still a critical component of Athena and EMR and everything else they do, but it's a technical metadata catalog. They built DataZone to get business metadata or semantics into it, and that is called DataZone. So now they have created SageMaker Catalog, which sits on top of this architecture that sits on top of Iceberg, S3 tables, S3 itself, Redshift managed storage, and federation from third-party sources. So SageMaker Catalog becomes the place where you go to discover different data and AI artifacts. Microsoft, next week is Microsoft Build conference. Purview is an integral part of their Fabric story. It's been around for a few years, and because it's Microsoft, it's so well integrated with all the other things they do, like data loss prevention, Microsoft 365, Power BI. So Microsoft Purview becomes a key piece. Also, it can get data federated from third-party data sources. I mentioned Iceberg. So Iceberg REST catalog is really important as a specification. Databricks has Unity Catalog, which, as you know, Databricks is built on Delta format, not Iceberg, but because they own Tabular, so they're making all attempts to bridge the gap between Delta and Iceberg. Snowflake came out with Polaris last year, and Horizon is their business metadata catalog, and Polaris is a technical metadata catalog. The beauty of a lot of these that you're seeing, almost all of these you're seeing, is because they have Iceberg REST catalog, which means any compute engine that is Iceberg compatible can view data that's made available through the catalog, the metadata that's available. So these are all IRCs, Iceberg REST catalogs. The specification that a lot of these support is V2. V3 has been out for a bit, and so they're moving to V3, but Iceberg REST specification version 4 just dropped a few days ago, but you won't see Iceberg REST v4 until probably the very end of 2025. Some of the things that it includes is that when the other competing open table formats like Hoodie and Delta were created, they were created out of the box to handle very high speed streaming ingestion data into Hoodie. Iceberg was not built for that. So they've been adding that streaming ingestion capabilities into V4, and you will see that end of the year. So that's the state of the art for data catalog. Let's move on to the next category of data management. We only have two companies mentioned here, Fivetran and Qlik. Although I could have put Confluent because they bought WarpStream, but I felt streaming is a bit adjacent to it. But interestingly, Fivetran and Confluent are on very, very similar journey, and now so is Qlik. And that journey is, again, Iceberg, managed lakehouse. So what is Fivetran? Fivetran is a leader in the extract and load space. They extract from a huge number of data sources into a large number of targets. So you can do batch, you can do real time, and there are connectors that can understand like SAP's data model, for instance, which is not that easy to understand. So they've got these amazing connectors that can read data and load it into the target. But there's so many sources and targets. So theoretically, your TAM or your total addressable market is limited. So what Fivetran did was they said, well, we don't need to just extract and load it, but we will load it in Iceberg. If it's in Iceberg, then it's sitting on top of Parquet files on an object store like Google GCS or S3 or Azure Blob Store. We'll manage it for you. And this is exactly what Confluent does. Confluent says that, we came out of Kafka, and so we use Kafka as a messaging layer, and we transfer streams of data into Target, but we will write it in iceberg format, something they call table flow, and then we can manage it for you as well. So you see how they're expanding their TAM. But I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about their Census acquisition, which happened a few days ago. What is Census? Census is in this highly debatable space called reverse ETL. What reverse ETL does is it switches sources and targets. So let me give an example of how reverse ETL works. Let's say your source is Salesforce, you get prospect data, and then you've got some transaction data in Oracle or SAP or some other database. You also bring that into the same destination. Destination in this case happens to be Snowflake. In Snowflake, you join, you do a lot of calculations, you calculate, let's say, Net Promoter Score, NPS. Wouldn't it be great if that NPS score, which generated out of the analytical target, was available in my CRM? So next time a customer calls, I know, oh, this is a highly valued customer, so I should pay extra attention. How do you go from Snowflake back into Salesforce? That is what's called reverse ETL. The detractors of the space say, wait, why is this a separate category? Why can't the ETL tool not just do bidirectional write back? So why does it have to be this? And then a lot of companies in the space said, yeah, let's just drop reverse ETL. Let's call it data activation. But whatever you call it, there are a few players in the space. Census is one of them. And so Fivetran now, it makes perfect sense. I think this is a good combination because you can get data from source into target and then use the same tool to write back. So in other words, your customer does not need to buy two separate tools. They just need to buy one tool. And so that, again, we will see how that goes. The other thing I mentioned here is Qlik buying Upsolver. Qlik is primarily a business intelligence tool. It started same time Tableau started, much before Power BI came up. Tableau ran away with the BI space. BI is a very slow-moving space. Not my favorite. But Qlik then decided to buy talent. So they went from BI to DI, or they added DI as well. DI is data integration. Before that, they bought Attunity, and so they've been on a buying stream. They also bought a natural language AI company. So Qlik has been slowly adding to its portfolio of companies. So now you've got this BI company that also has a solid data integration product from Talent, which Talent also has a catalog called Talent Catalog. So they have a data catalog, they have all these pieces, but they don't own the storage layer. Where are they sitting? They're sitting on top of Snowflake or Databricks or Oracle. So now they own the upper half, but not the lower half. So they're like, well, how do we get into the lower half? Well, you can't really start building a new database. We already have hundreds of databases. So you either buy a database or you start off with the lakehouse, because lakehouse is where there is massive momentum. So Upsolver was a company filled with brilliant people. They had done a lot of lakehouse optimization management pieces. Why is that important? Because although an open table format like Iceberg makes everything look super easy, you have a relational model on top of Parquet files, and you can do atomic upserts. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of complex copying and mirroring, copying and deletion of files going on and renaming. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that is hidden from the end user. In the wake of doing all this, you get an explosion of files that need to be compacted. You also end up with orphan files that need to be deleted. So Upsolver did all this management, and now with Qlik now moves a level below, and they say we can also not just be a BI and a DI and also do managed lakehouse for you. Lakehouse, the beauty of Lakehouse, other than what I've just said, is that any compute engine that's Iceberg or Delta or whatever that Lakehouse or Hoodie is supporting, any compute engine can run. And so Qlik still does not own the compute piece. There are a ton of compute engines, Starburst, Dremio, DuckDB, Pandas, and Spark are in the open source community. So who knows? Qlik may actually acquire a compute engine as well. But Upsolver does have a compute engine, although in the announcement that came out this week, we don't see that in their offering, but it's just the beginning. So this way, Qlik gets into the compute space, and then who knows, you may hear they're also in the data storage space. So just thinking out aloud here. All right, with this, let's move to AI space. So in AI, AI is, of course, every day, every hour, something new is going on. OpenAI buying Windsurf is a deal that has not yet closed as we record this. So what is Windsurf? Windsurf is a coding assistant or AI-based coding tool. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Windsurf and all its major competitors like Cursor and Replit are all based on VS Code. But by adding foundation models behind the scene and natural language interface in front, they have literally transformed the way software is being written. And this is, in fact, something that is now being called vibe coding because people are just giving natural language and it's writing code. Those of you who have been following this space for the last 15 years or so will remember that Google had a very interesting picture of these misshapen boxes of all sizes, and in the middle was a tiny, tiny black box that said software development. And what they were trying to convey was there's a massive set of tasks that need to be done to take that software code into production, like review the code, push it into production, do A/B testing, documentation, then maintain that code, bug fixes, all of that. So coding is actually a very small piece. So now what we see is that Windsurf has actually released something they call SWE1, SWE-1, or Software Engineer-1, because what Windsurf is saying is that we don't want to be in the business of just competing with cursors of the world. We want to address all the needs of a software engineer. OpenAI, on the other hand, is in the space of creating very, very large language models, LLMs. But they have also come to a conclusion that having generic large language models is not the answer. The answer is domain-specific small models. So they've taken their O3 model and they've fine-tuned it into a specialized model called Codex, which is meant for coding. So this combination, by the way, OpenAI is buying Windsurf for $3 billion. The word on the street is that they went after Cursor, which is probably the market leader in this space, but that price tag was 10 billion or above. So they settled for Windsurf, which is 3 billion. But this is a great combination because what OpenAI is indicating here is that we don't want to just be a model company. Remember, we talked about that we thought there'd be a database vendor, but they're not. But we want to go into this agentic thing that acts like a software engineer and does all the tasks. So coding as a service, if you may. So they're moving up that stack. Moving up the stack takes us to Coreweave. Coreweave is a hyperscaler. but for accelerated computing. Their data centers offer GPUs. They bought an AI and ML company, just like what we've talked about, that does the entire life cycle of what an AI engineer and ML engineer needs to do, called weights and biases. So they bought weights and biases because they know that just being at the bottom of the infrastructure layer is not enough. So they are also moving up the stack. And so is NVIDIA. NVIDIA's claim to fame is not just GPUs, but also CUDA, which is the library that locks people in. And CUDA is 15 years old, and it's still going strong. But how long can they hold on to that? So they've been buying all these companies, and these are only a few of them. But one that caught my eye is the last one, which is called Gretel. And Gretel is interesting because we have not talked about synthetic data at all in this podcast. And for some people think that synthetic data is needed to find all the edge cases to train a model or to do reinforcement learning. And because you don't have all cases of a situation available to you, so you create machine-generated artificial data that mimics. So statistically correct, and it mimics real data. That's your synthetic data. Gretel is a company that does that, and that was a very interesting acquisition. And again, we'll see how that does. So that's it. It takes us to the very last section. And I just wanted to mention, I'm not a security expert, so I don't really cover this, but I wanted to mention it because Google is buying Wix for $32 billion. All the acquisitions we've looked at in this are smaller than this one. So Wix is really big. And it's actually very interesting because it competes with Palo Alto Security, for instance. Palo Alto is one of the biggest customers of Google Cloud. So now Google has competition with its users. Wix gives them this ability to become a multi-cloud in the security space. Before that, they had bought Mandiant. And so Google is really expanding their story in the security space, which, like I said, is not in my space. So I'm going to move on to the very last thing you see here, which is IBM also making an acquisition, also very recently. This is a company you may not have heard of called Hakoda. It is a small boutique consulting company. So IBM Consulting is a very important organization within IBM because IBM is trying to own the agentic AI space, and consulting is how they deliver it to their clients. So to expand that consulting footprint, they bought Hakoda. Last week was IBM Think conference, and interesting things that we heard was that IBM Consulting thinks that digital workers ratio to human workers is going to be 10-1. But digital workers will do a lot of nitty-gritty, heavy lifting work, and the human workers will be more important in really addressing the business needs. So this consulting space is gearing up. In fact, IBM also announced that by 2028, 1 billion new applications will be developed. We will see how this goes, but for now, we will end here. Thank you very much for your attention, for staying till the very end. And until next time, see you.